Lake Tahoe looked perfect from above. Crystal clear blue water, snow-covered mountains, luxury homes, boats, tourists, and silence. For decades, people described it as one of the cleanest and most beautiful lakes in the world. But in 2024, something changed. After years of unstable weather and severe drought, the lake level began to fall. Shorelines that had remained underwater for generations slowly emerged into daylight again, and what appeared beneath the surface was not just old trash or forgotten debris. It was something much darker. At first, hikers and local visitors noticed small things along the exposed edges of the lake. Rusted metal, broken glass bottles, old fishing equipment. Some found tires buried in the sand, while others spotted strange pieces of machinery half covered in mud and rock. Most people assumed it was ordinary litter left behind over the years, but then divers began reporting larger discoveries. Entire vehicles appeared beneath the shallow water. Cars from the 1950s and 60s rested silently on the lakebed, as if they had been parked there decades earlier and never moved again. The deeper investigators looked, the stranger the lake became. Lake Tahoe is not an ordinary lake. It sits high in the Sierra Nevada mountains, over 6,000 feet above sea level, surrounded by steep granite peaks. It stretches more than 20 miles long and reaches depths close to 1,600 feet. That depth matters because deep lakes behave differently from normal bodies of water. Once something sinks into the lower layers, it can remain there for decades with almost no disturbance. The water near the bottom stays near freezing all year. There's almost no sunlight, very little oxygen movement, and almost no biological activity. In simple terms, the lake preserves things, and that preservation would soon reveal a hidden history nobody expected. As the drought worsened, environmental teams increased underwater surveys around the lake. At first, they focused on water quality and shoreline erosion, but the low water levels made some deeper zones easier to access. Divers who normally stayed near recreational areas began exploring sections of lake that had rarely been studied in detail. What they found looked less like random pollution and more like a forgotten graveyard beneath the water. Vehicles were scattered across the bottom in clusters. Some sat upside down. Others rested upright with doors still attached. Certain cars still had visible paint beneath layers of algae and mineral buildup. Inside a few vehicles, divers could still make out seats, steering wheels, and broken dashboards. The freezing water had slowed decay so dramatically that many objects appeared almost frozen in time. But the cars were only the beginning. Researchers soon brought in remotely operated underwater vehicles, small robotic machines equipped with cameras and lights capable of descending far below safe diving depth. As the machines moved deeper into the darkness, the lake transformed completely. Sunlight vanished. The water turned black. The only visible area was whatever the camera lights touched. At around 1,000 feet below the surface, the cameras began recording unusual shapes scattered across the lake floor. Cylindrical objects appeared partially buried in sediment. Then more appeared. Then dozens. Eventually it became clear these were industrial barrels. Hundreds of them. Some were grouped together in piles, while others stretched across wide sections of the lakebed. Many had corroded slowly over time, but because of the cold conditions, they had not fully broken apart. Some still carried faded markings and symbols. Others looked sealed shut. The arrangement suggested something deliberate. These barrels had not drifted naturally into the lake. Someone had transported them there. And then the cameras captured something terrifying. One of the containers appeared damaged. From a crack along its side, a faint cloud slowly leaked into the surrounding water. The movement was subtle, almost invisible at first, like smoke drifting through darkness. In deep water, where there are almost no currents, leak material does not quickly disperse. It hangs suspended, slowly spreading through the freezing depths. The research teams immediately collected samples from the surrounding area. When laboratory testing came back, the results shocked investigators. The water near the barrels contained elevated levels of heavy metals, including lead, mercury, cadmium, and arsenic. Chemical solvents and industrial compounds were also present. These were not naturally occurring concentrations. The contamination matched substances commonly linked to industrial waste disposal from the mid-20th century. Suddenly, the mystery changed from environmental curiosity into something much more serious. To understand how this happened, investigators began looking into Lake Tahoe's explosive development after World War II. Before the 1940s, Tahoe remained relatively isolated. Harsh winters and difficult mountain roads kept the area quiet for much of the year. But after the war, infrastructure improved rapidly. Highways expanded, tourism exploded, casinos and hotels began rising along the Nevada side of the lake, where gambling laws created enormous business opportunities. Money flooded into the region. Entire shorelines transformed within just a few decades. Construction crews worked constantly. Hotels, roads, entertainment centers, and housing developments appeared almost overnight. But rapid growth created enormous waste. Construction debris, chemical byproducts, machinery fluids, and industrial materials accumulated faster than disposal systems could handle. At the time, environmental regulations were weak. Many chemicals now considered dangerous were poorly understood or barely regulated at all. Proper disposal in remote mountain regions was expensive and difficult. Transporting waste over long distances through snowy terrain cost money and time. But the lake was deep, cold, and hidden. To some businesses and contractors, it likely seemed like the perfect solution. Evidence now suggests that for years, barrels containing industrial waste may have been dumped directly into Lake Tahoe under the assumption they would never be seen again. The deep basin acted almost like a natural vault. Once objects sank far enough, they disappeared permanently from public view. And for decades, the secret remained buried. Yet the deeper the investigation went, the darker the discoveries became. During several underwater surveys, cameras captured objects that did not resemble construction debris or industrial waste. Personal belongings appeared on the lake floor. Old suitcases, clothing, shoes, pieces of jewelry. Some items were partially buried in sediment, while others remained strangely intact because of the freezing conditions. Then came the discovery investigators refused to discuss publicly. According to multiple dive reports and unofficial sources connected to the research operations, cameras may have recorded what appeared to be human remains in deep sections of the lake. The near-freezing water and low oxygen levels dramatically slowed decomposition. Some remains reportedly appeared preserved far beyond what would normally happen in ordinary lakes or rivers. Officials have remained extremely careful about confirming details. Public statements focused mainly on environmental contamination and cleanup concerns. But behind the scenes, the deeper discoveries triggered serious attention from law enforcement agencies, and that reopened old stories surrounding Lake Tahoe's past. During the 1950s and 60s, Tahoe was not just a luxury tourist destination. It also became deeply connected to organized crime networks operating throughout Nevada and nearby regions. Casinos attracted enormous money, powerful businessmen, and criminal groups looking to profit from gambling operations. The mountains surrounding the lake created isolation. Remote roads and hidden shorelines made certain activities easier to conceal. For decades, locals whispered stories about disappearances linked to the casino era. Workers, gamblers, rivals, and witnesses allegedly vanished without explanation. Rumors claimed the lake itself became a dumping ground because its depth made recovery nearly impossible. Most people treated those stories like legends. Until now, investigators reviewing historical missing persons cases noticed disturbing overlaps between the timeline of the disappearances and the underwater discoveries. Many unsolved cases dated back to the same decades, when industrial dumping appeared most active. Several disappearances involved individuals connected to gambling operations or businesses around the lake. No official connection has been confirmed, but the timing has raised uncomfortable questions. What exactly lies at the bottom of Lake Tahoe? And how much has remained hidden beneath the surface for generations? Environmental scientists now face an enormous problem. Removing the barrels from 1,600 feet below the surface would require extremely expensive and dangerous operations. Disturbing the containers could release even larger amounts of contamination into the water all at once. Some experts believe leaving them undisturbed may actually be safer in the short term. Others strongly disagree. Lake Tahoe supplies water to surrounding ecosystems and supports millions of tourists every year. Even slow contamination spreading through the depths could eventually impact wildlife and water quality over time. Researchers worry that climate change may worsen the situation. As temperatures rise and water circulation patterns change, deeper layers of the lake could begin mixing more frequently with upper waters. If that happens, pollutants trapped for decades might spread faster than expected. And there's another terrifying possibility. Nobody truly knows how many barrels are down there. The surveys covered only certain sections of the lakebed. Large areas remain unexplored because of the extreme depth and dangerous conditions. Some researchers suspect the visible barrels represent only a fraction of what was dumped over multiple decades. The deeper cameras traveled, the more evidence appeared. Clusters of barrels, machinery, vehicles, debris fields stretching across the darkness. It looked less like isolated dumping and more like a hidden underwater archive of human activity buried beneath one of America's most beautiful lakes. The contrast makes the story even more unsettling. On the surface, Lake Tahoe still appears perfect. Tourists continue taking photographs beside crystal blue water. Boats cross the lake every day. Luxury resorts advertise peace, beauty, and untouched nature. Meanwhile, 1,600 feet below, toxic waste slowly leaks into the darkness beside forgotten wreckage from another era. The drought did not create these secrets. It simply exposed them, and the discoveries forced researchers to confront an uncomfortable reality. Sometimes nature hides human mistakes so effectively that entire generations forget they exist. The clear water of Lake Tahoe gave the illusion of purity for decades, but the deeper layers preserved a history nobody expected to uncover. What makes the story truly frightening is how ordinary the decisions probably seemed at the time. Dumping a few barrels, pushing damaged vehicles into deep water, ignoring environmental risks because the consequences felt invisible. Small decisions repeated over years eventually created a hidden disaster resting silently beneath the lake. And there may still be more waiting below. Some underwater researchers believe future exploration will reveal additional dumping sites in deeper, unexplored regions. Advanced sonar mapping has already identified strange formations along certain underwater slopes that have not yet been fully investigated. Several locations show dense clusters of objects partially buried beneath sediment. Nobody knows exactly what they are. Every new survey seems to raise more questions instead of answering them. How much contamination has already spread through the deep water? Who approved the dumping operations? Were officials aware of what was happening decades ago? And perhaps most disturbing of all, how many secrets can remain hidden inside a lake that deep? Lake Tahoe's beauty has not disappeared. The mountains are still breathtaking. The water still reflects the sky like glass. But now there is another image attached to the lake. A darker one. An image of robotic lights descending into endless black water and revealing rows of silent barrels resting beside forgotten wreckage beneath the cold depths. The drought lowered the water level by only a few feet, but it uncovered decades of buried history. And once seen, it cannot be unseen.